Radio 95.5, WOVV, Jonathan Chance with you.
Once there was an explosion, a bang which gave birth to time and space. Once there was an explosion, a bang which set a planet spinning in that space. Once there was an explosion, a bang which gave rise to life as we know it. And then came the next explosion. An explosion that will be our last.
Can you believe that's how they started the game? A brand new intellectual property. Where do you want it to start? How about the Big Bang? That takes confidence. Welcome back to 109 in the Sky, Capital Not Radio. It is April, the sun is finally showing its face again, and we're seeing the highs of the low 80s out on the coast. I am your host for the evening, here to take your mind off all the stuff in the news about the end of days, the dead crossing over the threshold into our world, and whatever else might be happening. Our main story today is about a creator whose name became synonymous with a whole industry, whose name hid legions of world-class designers, programmers, and artists, and whose name became the ire of an entire fan base for tricking them into going for a walk. All of this after the break, but first, here's Silk Road.
A DD model, huh? I thought all of you were found years back. If I could get you working, you could be my ticket out of here.
Sneaking. To go somewhere secretly, or to take someone or something somewhere secretly. The basics. Ever since the dawn of life, we've been forced to hide away, to watch our step and stick to the shadows, lest we be eaten. For as long as we've known, life has always strived towards going somewhere. Where that somewhere wasn't always clear, but to reach it had always required a fundamental understanding of the basics, of when to leap and when to sneak. 1987, Japan. Humankind had long since mastered the basics, but in the still in its infancy virtual realm, we just crawled out of the primordial soup. Half a megabyte of RAM was blisteringly fast, and media being stored on optical discs was fighting a bitter war against cassettes and proprietary cartridges. The industry was taking stride after stride, rapidly increasing in performance with every passing new release, leaping boldly into the future, but in the eye of the ongoing storm, caught right in the middle of an evolving world in a studio in Japan. A small development team spearheaded by a young, ambitious creator saw the problems in this approach. The well-established home computer in the MSX line had taken the country by as much of a storm as the mid-80s would allow, making headway in digitizing an entire population. But in this stampeding industry, the early home computer's meager performance wasn't going to be enough. The action-filled game that the studio had in the pipeline wasn't going to be able to be realized. The chip would fry itself to death before too many enemies crowded the screen, leaving them in the wake of the leaps that were happening all around them. So they gambled. Relentless action was a dead end, at least for now, so they decided to stick to the shadows, keep to themselves, and draw just enough attention to get to live another day. They went back to the basics. It might not have been the very first pioneering attempt at a stealth video game where avoiding contact with the enemy became a crucial point of interaction, but in 1987, the world had not yet seen anything exactly like Metal Gear before. A blend of tactical scenarios requiring players to keep their wits about them at every turn, enemies that would call for backup off-screen, and having to learn patrol routes was for many players the first time they'd experienced video games as something deeper than what they thought the medium could be. Every screen was just as tense as the next, leaving almost no space for breathing room. The small team might have tried to stay in the shadows, but the world had other plans. I was happy just making games as long as I had a roof over my head. Those were the words stated by game designer Hideo Kojima, but everything changed with Metal Gear Solid. (1998), the year that saw the first modules of the International Space Station launch, the birth of actress Elle Fanning, and the release of arguably the most influential first-person shooter of all time in Valve's Half-Life, also saw the coming of age of our little stealth series. In a seemingly jumbled string of words, in 1998, the world and their still revolutionary PlayStation consoles first met Metal Gear Solid. And oh boy, did everything change.
Trust your instincts as a soldier, as a gamer.
Shut those covers as soon as they're done spraying.
The people who say Metal Gear Solid is one of the most influential video games of all time are probably lowballing it. It became immense. Just like the first entry, more than a decade before, the main concept, a stealth-focused video game, was nothing new. The industry had seen dozens of those already, and even more that drew inspiration from the initial entry. But from the first splash screen, it was obvious that this was different. The concept didn't grow out of a necessity to hide away anymore, to design around the system's shortcomings and do your best. Sony's PlayStation was leagues ahead of the MSX they'd previously developed for. There was no reason to keep to the basics. They'd mastered those. It was time to leap.
So you're the one that the boss keeps talking about.
And you?
Special Operations Foxhound. Revolver Ocelot.
Fully fledged voice acting, cinematics borrowing from Hollywood, details unlike anything around it, and a narrative that at every turn kept players guessing. Things that in today's gaming landscape might be taken for granted, but in the late 90s it was unbelievable. Metal Gear Solid wasn't just a leap into realizing the potential that the medium had, but it was a vision so far into the future that even playing it today, it's sometimes hard to imagine it actually released more than 25 years ago. It's not strange that Metal Gear Solid and its lead director, Hideo Kojima, gained a following. The following years, Kojima became a rock star. The follow-ups to Metal Gear Solid, Sons of Liberty and Snake Eater released on the next generation PlayStation 2, and at this point there was nothing stopping the leaps. The new hardware gave way for even more intricate experiences, details fleshed out, twists and turns at every stop, and writing not seen elsewhere in the industry, or possibly even elsewhere on this planet.
Behind D.
Success after success after success, Kojima became a rock star.
Ready grenades! A dud!
Heralded as a bastion of creativity, the series cemented Konami and Kojima as a powerhouse in the industry, with Kojima in later interviews retelling stories of sick players writing to him saying they wouldn't give in until they had played his next game. And the line between adoration and a cult of personality is fine in the fairest of weather, but when the seas bubble over, any mist becomes the focal point. A mist that closed in during the development of Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain in the mid-2010s. What exactly happened during those last years at Konami, ultimately leading to Kojima leaving the company after the release of Metal Gear Solid 5, is probably something we will never truly know. Speculation about the period runs rife even today, and buried clues and leads seem to be found anywhere people look. It's a story best told by someone with ample time to do it justice, like Polygon's Samit Sarkar, who in an article from 2015 go over Konami's restructuring and changing of focus, ultimately leading them to removing the tagline, "a Hideo Kojima game," from almost all places it had previously been seen. From the outside looking in, it looks messy. Ladders kicked down, and bridges burned. The future grew unclear. Now, on their own, whisperings about how going independent wasn't ever going to work, along with a wavering commitment to the medium. It wasn't until renowned director and personal friend of Kojima, Guillermo del Toro, reached out to let him know that regardless of what had happened with Konami, people couldn't wait for the next Kojima game. They didn't care how, with what studio, or when it was delivered, they just knew it was going to be special. So the team made the decision, without knowing all the details, the path, the direction. For the people who wanted them, they were back. Back at frame 1. Back at the basics.
Alright, let's see if you're ready to fly. Oh, fuck. Here's where it all starts going wrong, and where this video goes off the rails. Don't let anyone tell you I didn't have a plan. A plan meticulously thought out, every shot pictured, every scene storyboarded, every line memorized. But as they say, even the best laid plans never survive first contact with the enemy. And that enemy, well, it was sand mostly. The plan was to make this elaborate movie. To go along with the normal talk about video game content, I was going to play a character, a scavenger, lost far from where they came from, looking for any ticket back home. A scavenger stumbling over a drone. A drone worth millions if only they could get it working. A drone that flew for 3 full seconds before crashing into the dirt and completely shattering. Even the best laid plans never survive first contact, and this one was horrible. So it didn't even crest the first hill. It's not like I can rewrite the thing. The drone is like the thing. It's like almost more important than me in the damn video. I can't just make it a normal video where I just talk to the camera. Anyway, look at that. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
For as long as we've known, life has always strived towards going somewhere. Where that somewhere wasn't always clear, but to reach it had always required a fundamental understanding of the basics. Are humans really constrained to this duality, of forever seizing the moment and leaping for the far edge, or keeping back, surveying and analyzing, sneaking? Have we not moved past that? Are we not evolved? Well, come to think of it, maybe we're not even there yet. It would probably be disingenuous to paint the picture of Kojima being on his last legs and struggling to make ends meet, because I don't think that's true. Publishers would probably fight each other to death if they had the chance of adding a Hideo Kojima game to their lineup. But from a creative, artistic view, it's always been clear that the teams behind Metal Gear cared about their work. And now being completely cut off, disconnected, and forced to stay on the outside looking in, I find it hard to not, at some level, sympathize. I remember the wishful discussions with friends around the time of where Kojima would end up and what possibly could be his next project. Metal Gear had always been wildly different from anything else in the industry, seemingly straying away from most modern trends to just pursue that Kojima factor. A je ne sais quoi never fully understood, but immediately recognized.
My name is Pliskin. Iroquois Pliskin, Lieutenant Junior Grade.
The whisperings started. Ludens. That's what reverberated around the communities. With every baseless rumor forever fading into the abyss, this one brought back an echo. It was a nonsense word to most, Latin meaning playing, a term present in game design circles for the best part of a century, but maybe first popularized in 1938 by Dutch historian Johan Huizinga. Homo Ludens, the playing human, an exploration into how the act of playing is central to the human experience and a cornerstone in how culture develops, or something. I didn't read it. I got stuck on the foreword.
Morning. I'm fucked. I don't know why. I thought going to sleep might fix it. It didn't. Funny that. Yeah, the drone is completely dead. I was completely ready to just give up. Go in here and, I don't know, say sorry, I guess. But then I was clearing out my laptop and I stumbled on an excerpt from a PDF of a book. Bear with me. Of Homo Ludens. But the reason I had it was because I thought that Kojima was inspired by this thing. You know, he named his studio mascot Ludens, and I just opened it up. And at the end of the foreword was, to fill in all the gaps in my knowledge beforehand was out of the question for me. I had to write now or not at all. And I wanted to write.
2016, Los Angeles. Speculations, rumors, discussions, all running wild, leading up to the biggest event in the industry, and during E3 2016 at Sony's press conference, all of them were shut down, quickly, effectively, and decisively, with a simple,
Hello everyone, I'm back.
whether you completely signed your soul over to the cult of Kojima or not, after months of theories, seeing a childhood hero dragged through the mud, it was impossible not to smile. What followed was a trailer for a new project, and while the introduction had been short and simple, this was anything but. Featuring a naked Norman Reedus, babies with tar black umbilical cords, beached whales, and handprints appearing out of nowhere. Death Stranding. No one understood a thing. It was abstract, surreal, and absolutely bonkers, but it stole the show. It was wildly different from anything else.
Look, I'm trying my hardest to rewrite the scenes here to capture the essence and somehow do it without the drone. I'm like, why? I have them here. Why don't I just tell you what was supposed to happen? I don't want to sit inside here when Iceland is out there. I'm painting up this picture that this was supposed to be like a masterpiece. But let's be real, it wasn't. It was the same dumb shit I always do with an even dumber twist on it. It's so stupid. I gotta show you this, come on.
And the funny thing about Death Stranding in the years leading up to its release was everyone seemed to be on board. It was just accepted that at any point a new trailer would drop, you were in for a ride, you would see stuff you couldn't possibly contextualize, and then you'd be left with far more questions than you'd come in with. What type of game was it even? The teasers showed battlefields from world wars, countless celebrity cameos, and futuristic firearms in the hands of our presumed protagonist. No one was getting any wiser, but it didn't seem to matter. It was Kojima, the master of tactical espionage action, a pioneer in adding gameplay mechanics that constantly kept the players entertained and occupied, and Death Stranding was going to be full of it. That much was certain. Wait, hold on. Is this all you do? You walk? All you do is walk? That's all you do? It's just walk? You're just walking forever? That's what do you mean? You didn't like it?
So about here in the story, there was supposed to be this scene where me and the drone kind of bond. Sort of the first bonding scene. At the end of the last chapter, the drone woke up and there were introductions and all of that. Like, he showed me a map, and then I looked at my map and I realized that we need to go to different places. I need to trick this this drone to go with it. Like I said, it's not a masterpiece. I don't know why I really hyped it up for it to be that. It's not deep, it's drivel. It's dumb.
People hated it. It's a simplification. One look at the review scores from the initial release window shows that there were obviously loads of people who got on board with Kojima Productions' new experimental output, but in the everything is black and white outrage culture that drives the internet, a lot of people were very loud and they very much hated it.
That's all you do, it's just walking.
Death Stranding is different. Everything shown in the trailer is in here, and just like the trailers and the team's previous projects, it is unlike anything else ever released. But the path it wanders down is different. After the initial cutscene, as you are given control and gently push the analog stick forward for the first time, the game has essentially already shown you its main loop. You walk. The world is gone, completely destroyed, desperate, and disconnected. People holed up in walled settlements and shelters, never daring to set foot outside, and their fate now lay in the hands of the few people still wandering the lines in between. You, a porter, effectively a postal worker for the age after ages, handling deliveries, picking up packages and handing them off to someone else down the hill, and in a world where roads have long since withered away, you walk. The term walking simulator had long before the release of Death Stranding been thrown around as a tongue-in-cheek phrase of labeling games that stripped interactivity away from players and focused on telling a story. I remember the release of the tiny game Dear Esther in 2012 and how it set off an avalanche of arguments discussing what really constitutes a game. If you just walk and look at things, surely that's no game, right? A game has to have a failure state, a game has to have an objective, a game has to be fun, right? Like Metal Gear Solid, that was a game. But now here is Death Stranding, the new release of the prodigal child of game directing, and it's a walking simulator, a game that seems to think you want to spend hours and hours without really anything to do. Sometimes setting up a ladder and maybe the rare route planning to get over some tricky ravine, but that's about it. To reiterate all of the things shown in the trailer, combat scenarios, World War scenes, and skulking around in the shadows to avoid otherworldly beings, that's all in here. They didn't lie, but it doesn't seem to be the main focus. For a team that arguably defined stealth combat to later excelling in every aspect of virtual warfare, how come they would miss the mark this heavily and end up here?
Okay, so now we're in the middle of this whole bonding. We're building a relationship here, and in this scene, the whole idea was like, all right, you're gonna have to imagine that there's a drone here for this to work, I think. I was gonna be sitting here eating something, and I was like, this guy hasn't eaten anything. Maybe he wants a chocolate bar. And then the whole scene was like, he was gonna trick me, and I was gonna offer him the chocolate bar, and we were gonna have a laugh together. This isn't really working, is it? This isn't really gonna work out. Should just have someone like CGI model a drone for this. Why didn't I just do that from the start?
Tricked. That's how a lot of people felt. Kojima Productions games, even before they became independent, had always had slow starts. Hours upon hours of cutscenes were nothing new for the players familiar with the eccentric creator's work, but when the gameplay loop didn't seem to break open, even after more than 5-10 hours of playing, a lot of people felt a little tricked, as if this sly game director had somehow gotten them, taken their money and lured them into playing a no gameplay snooze fest where all you do is compete against FedEx. And it didn't help that it was so weird. Metal Gear had always been strange, so the comparisons were always going to be there, but in Death Stranding it was elevated far beyond anything previous. Over-the-top characters with even more over-the-top names spewing exposition that you'd only come to grasp 90 hours later, and oddball concepts that required you to completely suspend your disbelief and just buy it were everywhere. But because it was all framed and interluded by you simply going for a walk and doing little to nothing else, it could, for many players, be seen as insulting. Metal Gear had given out rewards both in the narrative turns it twisted its unorthodox storytelling towards, but also through the gameplay. The sheer amount of details the games had included made players feel like after any engagement, no matter if they successfully stealthed through it or fumbled and had to go on the offensive, they were rewarded with a plethora of new experiences to treasure. Every frame was action-filled, tense and chock full of high-octane gameplay. What I have just tried to describe to you is a video game being fun, and the Metal Gear Solids were fun, but Death Stranding, well, it wasn't. It kinda sucked, and you were led astray, tricked and owned, completely gotten, forced to experience something wildly different from what you expected.
I gotta be real with you. I don't know if this is doing what I want it to be doing. This is now a video about making a video about a video game. I don't know if it was the coffee talking in the morning, but I felt like I had salvaged this, somehow wrangled some sort of meaning out of failure. But now it just feels like I'm retreading the same steps, shooting the same scenes, but worse. I don't feel like it's adding anything. I don't know.
If you want to get a different outcome, you must change the process. Confidence comes from doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. It takes courage to change that. Those are words spoken by Doom and Wolfenstein composer Mick Gordon at his GDC talk in 2017. A different outcome, a new process, courage, not confidence. When reset back at frame 1, the basics are not of concern. We're not there yet. There's a long and arduous route to wander before we would ever get back there, and it's one taken, one step at a time. Maybe it's not trying to be the same. Maybe it's not trying to lead you through the same process. Maybe the basics aren't the only answers. Maybe it's trying to show you something.
This all feels so... I don't know. What am I even doing? I'm putting on a brave face like, look how wacky I am. Look how self-aware I am just talking about the video I would have made. This was supposed to be the best video I'd have ever done. Let me get my phone out. I need to record this mountain in case I need it for B-roll or whatever. God knows I have time to fill. This was supposed to be the cassette that my character would carry along all throughout the video. Up until chapter 2, where it falls out of his bag, the drone finds it, and he decides to listen to it, reluctantly. He were to contain a voice of someone back home, but someone that would tell him that he was too stubborn, that he'd always been, too afraid of looking straight ahead and seeing what's there, too set in his ways and too focused on what he thinks he needs to do, too afraid of finding something he wasn't looking for. This obviously would be where he would realize he'd found a friend in the drone. Look, as I said, it's no masterpiece. I do have it. Alright, dumbass, you're gonna have to get like a real actor for this, but I'm just gonna record this as a placeholder so that I don't forget it in the future. Don't use this in the video. You're an idiot. You know that you're an idiot. You're so obsessed with this idea, you can't shake it, can you? We're all gone. All of it. There's nothing left. When deep down, you know that. And yet you've always been this way. So focused on the right thing, your plan, your way, that you completely miss what's right in front of you. And yet you're sitting here, planning, writing, rewriting, desperately trying to find a way to fix it, but there's nothing to fix. It's gone. You're sitting there right now, aren't you? Trying to fix the past. I know it. You've always been an idiot. Maybe it's not about
what's happened. That's gone. Maybe it's trying to show you something. Clear, but to reach it had always required a fundamental understanding of the basics.
There was no point in retracing it. The basics were not just leaping, not just sneaking, but just being. A bleak, colorless carbon copy of an original idea. I needed something else. The pictures I had never taken were so ingrained in my mind, I needed to go elsewhere. I was desperately chasing footprints I never put down, never left. I needed to open my eyes.
The comparisons were always going to be there. They were always going to be impossible to shake. Kojima is arguably the most famous game director ever to publish, and countless people all over the globe owed years and years of their childhoods to the creation the team he had been a part of had dreamt up. They were always going to be there. They're not unimportant or irrelevant either, but through the sheer contrast of the two experiences, they misled us. For comparing Death Stranding with any previous game from its creator is a dead end. If you were to allow me 1 second for an overly theatrical metaphor, a car and a space shuttle are both modes of transport. The mediums they share are the same, but the destination is different. And when the lines in between those destinations are all but wiped out, to connect them again, you go back to the basics. You don't sneak, you don't leap, you walk. Death Stranding is slow. A game where the first hours of meaningful gameplay is exclusively just watching Norman Reedus walk forward is surely a recipe for disaster. A slow, lumbering walking simulator, but there's a crucial difference, for it's designed to be this way. From the very start, it was designed to be slow. In a paper from 2001, researchers Redström and Hallnäs discussed the term slow technology and how it, in comparison to tech being made as accessible, as beginner-friendly and as easy to learn as possible, offers something different. Time for reflection, not as a byproduct of a thought-provoking line of questioning, but as a key central design point to allow technology to consume time, let it simmer, rather than freeing up time for something else through ease of use. On the surface, it might sound like the age-old debate of functionality versus form, but in the case of slow tech, functionality doesn't just mean solving a problem. It isn't part of a tool designed to rectify an established point of struggle, like an electrical screwdriver to save time, a faster motorbike to gain time, or fluorescent energy drink to reclaim time. It's more deliberate than that. The time put in is not time reluctantly used to satiate some basic need, it's time allowed to tick away, to see something else impossible to predict. Maybe it's nothing, but crucially, maybe it could be something.
So how about it? Aren't you getting tired of the grind? Isn't this what you've been waiting for this whole time? A game over.
The Earth is dead. Long gone since the Death Stranding occurred, leaving nature to reclaim every crevice that humankind had pushed it out of, and the game is green. The first area you set foot in is a verdant mix of fields, hills, and mountains, and to be fair, there isn't a hell of a lot to look at, which in a game where you walk from point A to point B with a couple of packages on your back might be another cardinal sin. Metal Gear had had a near limitless amount of details in every possible nook and cranny, but here we go again with the comparisons. What Metal Gear didn't have was time. Might seem like an insane statement for a series that in its fourth entry had an almost 90-minute cutscene on top of hours more, but every second was meticulously used to convey something, whether a story plot point or an action scene. It owned all of those hours. In the novelization of Death Stranding, the first delivery main character Sam takes on is said to take him hours. And while the game version doesn't go that far, it isn't afraid to let you think, to let you be alone with your thoughts and use any time you get just as you feel like, to go over what just happened to your character and why you ended up here, or to reflect on something completely different about your life, about your own path, about your own journey. It's by design. Every footstep is deliberate, and in the same breath, it isn't. Death Stranding urges you to walk one foot in front of the other. It shows you the objectives in the distance, and any map consultation is just a button press away, but it lets you go about it however you want. Are the steps taken as the crow flies, following the dried up riverbeds, or over whatever mountain may be in the way? That's totally up to you, and the game thrives on this, the comparatively mundane. It celebrates tools that aid in its main goal, to allow for reflection, giving Sam a new pair of boots to walk farther, setting up ladders to rise above the journey, and using climbing anchors to get back to it. You're a small, insignificant dot in a big world, and it's a long hike ahead. Might as well get some thinking done. The simple tools are soon discarded. In traditional gaming progression, boots making way for motorcycles and cars, and onboard batteries allowing for exoskeletons, enabling bigger deliveries. But as your capabilities grow, the world grows alongside them. What started as a 20-minute walk within eyeshot is extended far beyond the horizon. You have to push further, you have to conquer more steps, and even when on a state-of-the-art motorbike, the world around you is still. At some points, it's a blur of blues and greens whooshing past your periphery, but it's calm. The tools allow you to solve a problem, to deliver, to connect the world, but they enable you to think, to reflect. And there's nothing stopping you from walking. Bar a few moments when time is of the essence, you are the expert here, the one who delivers, and it's at your discretion. One step at a time, one hill over the next if you so please, and that's the beauty of it. Whether you decide to perceive this planet holding all of our memories from the driver's seat, picking out distant landmarks, or if you engage directly with every rock, every stone, and every blade of grass, it's an experience that values you and your time. As stated before, your digital hikes are meant to consume it, to trade the time invested for time for reflection. But it does this equally well at 60 miles per hour or at 1.
I got here to make something. Something I felt like I couldn't make anywhere else. I thought about traveling closer to home, just maybe walking out the door and shooting something, but it had to be here. I was gonna make the best video I'd ever done. And so I brought what felt like every modern tool in the known universe with me. Cameras, gimbals, drones, hard drives, the list goes on forever, but now I'm just me. Admittedly, a pair of fancy hiking pants, a Walkman from 1986, and a pair of wet boots. There was supposed to be drone shots all over this. I was supposed to look at all of this from high up above through a pair of goggles. But without it, I'm here. Right in the middle of it.
This freedom, this openness to allowing you to take your time to reflect enables another thing. The basics. Because as we talked about, all the action-filled segments of the early trailers are all in here. The tense war scenarios, aggressive porters desperately wanting to steal your cargo, and otherworldly beings bridging the afterlife, and tense sneaking missions. When the game transitions to these moments, the contrast is a beautiful symphony. It's not strange, with the expertise within the development team, that these elements would be well developed, but in comparison to what had come before, they're also basic. The combat, the stealth, the sneaking and leaping are all shadows of their former selves. Metal Gear Solid's near endless ways to engage your enemies are reduced to a couple, and they're all simpler, but again, they're not the main destination. They never were. That lays beyond the next hill, and you're just here to get there. The simplicity forces you out of your comfort zone without a huge barrier to entry. In a flash, you're snapped out of reflection and back at the basics, and you're only here to get back to it. Death Stranding, unlike many big immersive media releases, is not afraid to let stillness be the main point of interaction. It isn't afraid to let you be alone, to think and rethink, to ponder and reponder, to reflect, to repatriate. And in a modern media landscape where seemingly every major release is fighting for your attention, promising unseen levels of dopamine release, at some levels for that you can't rely on the same old process. You can't rely on confidence, but courage. To dare to go, or something. A trait in this industry often exemplified by indie developers. People in their bedrooms, in small studios among friends, and in long night Discord calls. The people who dare to dream, not primarily for commercial success or sales numbers beyond wildest compare, but for the hell of it. To have an idea and test it. Throw it out there and see if it works, or if it doesn't. Ultimately, it might be unimportant. Maybe it's just the process itself. Maybe it's not to solve a problem, to become as adept as possible in creating, but to enjoy the time you spend doing it. Time allowed to tick away, to reflect. That's the one line constantly echoing through my mind in A Short Hike, Stray, and other smaller experiences, all focusing to some point on the act of walking and thinking. These are different games, different from a lot of mainstream media output, and for me, a respite from the blazing speed of the social media cycle. The constant chase of likes and interactions, of rage bait and doomer posting, to the forever scroll keeping me anxious and scared. These are, on some level, the antidote. But it's not a fix-all that comes for free. For them to work, you have to allow them to take time. A resource now more scarce than maybe ever before. A day off is a day lost. A day where productivity declined, where profit stagnated. But in a world after the end of ages, time is all we've got. In Death Stranding, time is the only thing you have left. It's not lost on me that the main way you're repaid for carrying out deliveries in Death Stranding is by literal, not even different in name, likes. An actual like counter following your username as you hike across the barren landscape, but I don't think it's lost on the developers either. In-universe interviews and emails talking about exactly that. A world so obsessed with validation, constantly chasing likes and interactions, a remnant of the world before the end, and now they're the only currency worth anything. A currency worth nothing, giving time back to you, for you to spend however you feel. A deeply human longing to regain the freedom we wrestled out of eternal struggle over millennia, lost to the powers that be, only made our very own through the end of time. Homo sapiens, the thinking human. Homo faber, the crafting human. Homo Ludens, the playing human. In a game so enamored by the past, the future, and present, the question of who, what, and when we are is central to the whole thing. Thinking, crafting, playing. A scientific name, a wishful next step in evolution, a playful title given to a new generation that's found all over Death Stranding, all over Kojima Productions, and all over the end of time.
I don't know what this feels like anymore. Part of me says it might end up all right. Of course, the other version was going to be perfect. Completely flawless and a masterpiece. Everyone would talk about it. But in reality, it would have been filled with awkward composition, inconsistent lighting, and all the other stuff that comes with the territory. I got out here to make something. And when everything fell apart, I didn't know what to do. I was confident. I'd prepared more than I'd ever prepared for a project before. I had every shot listed out, I had storyboards, I had everything. And then I had nothing. Nothing but this urge to still want to make something. But I couldn't. To fix all the problems, all the issues would, it would take way more money, way more time than I had. I realized I had to make something now. I had to write now, or not at all. I have no insightful comment about how Homo Ludens relates to Death Stranding or Kojima. I'm sure you can find loads of videos about that online. I haven't even read it. I got stuck on the foreword.
Finding something you weren't looking for. It's a scary premise because to fully embrace it, you have to reconcile with the fact that you aren't fully in control. That the experience you wanted wasn't there, but that's fine. Something else was, something different than what you had dreamt up. It's scary, but maybe it's okay. The world is spinning off into the black just fine without you pushing it along, so maybe it's okay to let it twirl through the cosmos and just enjoy the ride. In our online content environment, letting go of the reins is scary. To be up to speed requires a non-stop engagement to content consumption, and whether the goal a person sets for themselves is to take on every single mainstream release or just enough to feel included in a small community, the time investment asked for is unlike anything previously seen. And everyone is chasing your eyeballs, your money and your time, so the ante goes up. Stuff has to be brighter, bolder, bigger and faster. It can't afford to dilly-dally around in the murky waters. Too long spent in silence is a death sentence. To just be swiped away, it has to be endless. A forever scroll, forever keeping you forever locked off from thinking, from pausing, from reflecting. Is this the main reason that the slower, more open, less directed Death Stranding didn't land for everyone? No, I'm sure it isn't. I'm painting up a doomsday picture because it's enticing, because the real world is too complex, too nuanced, and too scary. An idealized picture of our blue marble, even if it's one ringing the bells of annihilation, is easier to come to terms with. I'm sure people had completely justified reasons for not meshing with our weird walking sim, just like how this is a justifiable reason. We've been desensitized. The move away from slower, less immediately accessible experiences is agnostic. Just because I draft you up this picture doesn't mean it's the wrong development, but it's a change. And I think it's at some level telling that after a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, giving a sliver of time back to people, some of them found their way back to it. The reclaimed seconds allowed to be spent on Death Stranding, on walking, on thinking and reflecting, to tick away, so that they could see what the vision was, for exactly what it might have been.
And that's why I'm adding on here. Is Death Stranding perfect? No. Even as a slow tech tool to allow for reflecting, it's sometimes messy. It stumbles over rocks and sometimes can't decide if it wants to chase time trials or take in the scenery, but that's part of it. 3 playthroughs deep, the game is really showing its seams and struggles to keep up with what I want to do, but it's unlike anything else out there. Going in, I was looking for the next big blockbuster. I was looking to make a movie, but that wasn't there. That wasn't ever really on the cards. What was, though, was maybe exactly what I needed, right under my nose. Not in a pair of goggles, through high-tech weaponry or a well-crafted script, but under my boots, one step at a time. So is this video perfect? No. Is it better than it would have been if it was done the way it was initially planned? I don't know, but to fill in all the gaps in my knowledge beforehand was out of the question for me. I had to write now or not at all. and I wanted to write. Take only pictures, leave only footprints.